The rain had just started when Elena Beaumont slipped out the back gate of her father's estate, her heart pounding with the thrill of rebellion. She hated the dinners, the endless list of men her father approved of, the feeling of being watched even in her own home. Being the daughter of Richard Beaumont, the ruthless billionaire whose empire ruled half the city, meant living in a golden cage. But tonight, she was free. Free to meet him. He called himself Jay. Mysterious, funny, a little rough around the edges, but with eyes that seemed to carry a storm of secrets. They'd met at a downtown art show weeks ago, her escape from the uptown elite world. He didn't ask about her last name, and she didn't offer it. Maybe that was the first lie. But in his presence, she felt seen. Not as a name or a fortune, but as Elena. What she didn't know, what no one did, was that Jay had already been inside the Beaumont mansion before. Not as a guest, but as a shadow. A masked figure who moved like a ghost through the halls. It was all over the news just days ago, billionaire robbed in daring home invasion. Her father's prized vault cleaned out, priceless documents and hard drives gone. No arrests. No suspects. And no clues. But Elena never suspected Jay. Why would she? In a quiet corner of the city, away from cameras and questions, they met again under the faded lights of a closed bookstore. He kissed her like he knew time was running out. She laughed like she hadn't in years. And in that moment, neither of them could hear the ticking clock. Neither of them spoke of who they really were. Love was growing between them, dangerous and blind. But behind Jay's soft gaze and charming smile, there was pain. His family had once lived in a small neighborhood just across the river, until Beaumont Industries bought the land, forced everyone out, and left lives in ruins. Jay was 15 when he watched his mother cry herself to sleep, his father disappear into addiction, and his younger sister get sick with no money for treatment. All while Richard Beaumont grew richer. Jay had sworn revenge. The robbery was just the beginning. Yet, falling for Elena wasn't part of the plan. She was supposed to be a symbol of everything he hated. But instead, she became a crack in his armor, a reason to doubt everything. The closer he got to her, the harder it was to separate the girl from her father's sins. And for Elena, each night with Jay felt more real than her whole life in silk sheets and glass towers. She had no idea she was falling for the man who had just betrayed her family in the worst way. Then, one evening, everything began to unravel. Jay showed up late, eyes darker than usual. Elena felt it, something had changed. He held her tighter, kissed her slower, like he was saying goodbye. And when she pressed him, asking what was wrong, he simply said, "Sometimes love is the hardest thing to walk away from." She didn't understand. Not yet. But back at the Beaumont mansion, security cameras had just finished analyzing a glitch in the footage from the night of the robbery. The system flagged a face. Not a full match, but close. Too close. The name Jay suddenly meant more than she could imagine. And just like that, the walls of trust, love, and secrets began to close in. Because what happens when love collides with vengeance? And when the truth finally comes out, who will survive it? Elena couldn't sleep that night. Jay's words kept echoing in her mind, sometimes love is the hardest thing to walk away from. There was something final in the way he said it, something heavy, like he was carrying a secret too big for them both. She sat by her bedroom window, staring out at the city lights, wondering if she'd missed something all along. Who was he, really? The next morning, her father was unusually quiet at breakfast. Normally, Richard Beaumont barked orders at his staff, read financial reports aloud, or criticized the latest government decisions. But today, he stared at a file in his hand. The color in his face had drained, and for the first time in years, he looked afraid. Elena noticed it right away. "What's wrong, Dad?" she asked, trying to sound casual. He didn't answer at first. Then, slowly, he looked up. "The man who broke into our home, we may have a lead." A face popped up in the system. "It's not a full match, but it's close." "Young man. He's been hiding in plain sight." Elena's fingers tightened around her glass of orange juice. Do you know who he is? We're running it through the system now, he said, voice sharp again. Whoever he is, he's going to regret ever stepping foot on Beaumont property. Her heart thudded in her chest. She swallowed hard and forced a nod, pretending she didn't feel like the room was tilting. Later that day, she slipped out again, taking her old car instead of the driver. She needed to see Jay. She needed answers. When she arrived at the bookstore, it was closed. The dusty windows stared back at her like blind eyes. She texted him. No reply. She called. Straight to voicemail. Panic settled in her stomach. Was he gone? Or worse, caught? Back in her car, she tried to piece everything together. Jay had never told her where he lived, never brought her to his place. He always met her in neutral spaces. Art shows, coffee shops, park benches. At first, she thought it was romantic, spontaneous. Now, it felt calculated. She remembered a moment, 2 weeks earlier. They were walking past a homeless man who was yelling at no one in particular. Jay had stopped, dropped some cash into the man's hand, and whispered something that made the man stop yelling and smile. Elena had asked about it, but Jay just shrugged. He used to live next to us, back when we had a place to live. Back when we had a place to live. It had sounded like a memory, but now she heard it differently. A clue. A cry for help, maybe. Or a warning. Jay wasn't just any man. He was someone who had lost everything. And if what she feared was true, if her father had played a part in that loss, then Jay's love for her had been tangled in something far more dangerous than she had imagined. Meanwhile, in a small apartment across the city, Jay sat alone, staring at an old photo. It was cracked and faded, showing a young boy, his parents, and a little girl with bright eyes. His sister. Before the eviction. Before the sickness. Before the world turned its back on them. He had gotten what he came for. The files he'd stolen from Richard Beaumont's vault held everything, evidence of shady land deals, bribes, cover-ups. Jay had planned to leak it all. Burn Beaumont's empire to the ground. But now, there was Elena. He loved her. He hadn't meant to. At first, she was a tool. A way in. But then she smiled at him one night, really smiled, and something inside him cracked. She wasn't like her father. She listened. She laughed. She dreamed of things money couldn't buy. He knew she didn't deserve to be part of this war. And yet, she was caught in the middle now. He closed the photo album and slipped it into his bag. He had one more night before everything changed. Back at the mansion, Richard Beaumont watched as his security chief entered the room. We found a match, the man said grimly. Facial recognition connected him to old protest footage from 8 years ago. Family evicted from our East River development project. Father overdosed. Sister died a year later. Name's Jaden Cole. Beaumont's face darkened. So this is personal. Yes, sir. He stood, staring out the window. If he's come for revenge, he's about to find out what happens when you cross a Beaumont. But Elena was already putting the pieces together. She found an old article online. Community uprooted by corporate buyout, families protest Beaumont project. One photo showed a teenage boy, shouting with a sign in his hand. She zoomed in. It was him. Jay. Or rather, Jaden Cole. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the rest. Names, dates, accusations, all pointing back to her father. Everything Jay had never said now screamed at her in silence. And still, her heart ached. Because if what she was reading was true, then her father wasn't just a businessman, he was a man who had destroyed lives to build his fortune. And the man she loved had once been the boy who lost everything because of it. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. Elena grabbed her keys. She had to find him. Before her father did. Before the truth became blood. Elena's hands gripped the steering wheel as she drove through the streets, the rain now pouring down in sheets, blurring her vision. Every second felt like an eternity, the weight of her discovery pressing down on her chest. She tried to push the thoughts away, tried to ignore the feeling that everything she had believed about her father, about herself, was slipping away. But the truth was there, undeniable. Jay wasn't just a man she had fallen in love with. He was the son of a family her father had destroyed. And worse, he had taken everything from her father, everything that mattered. The robbery had been just the beginning. Jay was playing a game, and Elena was the unwitting pawn. But where did that leave her? On the wrong side of everything she knew. Her loyalty was being tested, torn between love for a man who was nothing like the one she had imagined, and a father who had never once treated her as anything more than an accessory to his wealth. She parked outside the rundown apartment building where she knew Jay was staying. She had no idea what to expect. He had always been kind, warm even, but was it all just an act? Had she been fooled by a man who only cared about revenge? Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from her father. "I know what you're up to. Stay away from him, Elena. He's dangerous. You don't know him like I do." Her pulse quickened. Dangerous? Of course, he was dangerous. He had just stolen from them, destroyed her father's life's work in a single night. But what about her life? What about her heart? She stepped out of the car, her boots splashing in the puddles as she approached the building. The streets were eerily quiet. As she entered the lobby, the smell of damp concrete and old wood hit her, a stark contrast to the polished marble floors she was used to. The building was a far cry from the luxury of the Beaumont estate. She moved up the stairs slowly, her mind racing. She needed answers, needed to know if he was truly the man she thought he was. Or if everything was just a lie. At the door of his apartment, she hesitated for a moment before knocking. Her heart pounded in her chest. What if he wasn't there? What if he was gone, taking the evidence with him and leaving her to face the truth alone? The door creaked open slowly, and there he was, Jay, looking more like a stranger than the man she had fallen in love with. His eyes were darker, haunted, as if the weight of everything he had done had finally caught up with him. "Elena," he said quietly, almost a whisper, his voice thick with tension. "What are you doing here?" She tried to steady her breath, but it escaped in ragged gasps. "I know who you are, Jay. I know what you've done. Jaden Cole, the boy who lost everything. The man who robbed my father." He flinched, but only for a moment. His face hardened, and he stepped back, letting her in without a word. She walked past him, her eyes scanning the small, cluttered apartment. It was so different from the luxury she was accustomed to. A far cry from the marble counters and gold chandeliers. This was a place of survival, not comfort. "I didn't want you to find out this way," Jay said, his voice low, regret heavy in every word. "But I couldn't keep lying to you." "Lying?" Elena's voice cracked. "You didn't just lie. You took everything from us. Everything my father worked for. And now she stopped, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to spill. "You're making me choose between him and you." Jay ran a hand through his hair, his jaw clenched. "I didn't want this, Elena. You have to understand. What your father did, he ruined my family. He took everything from us, and I promised myself I would make him pay. I didn't expect to fall in love with you." His eyes met hers, and there was a rawness in them that almost broke her heart. "I didn't expect any of this." Elena felt her anger shift, not away but deeper, tangled with a confusion she couldn't untangle. "So, what now? What do we do? You've already done your damage. Are you just going to disappear? Leave me to pick up the pieces?" "I don't know," Jay admitted, his voice thick. "I thought I knew what I had to do. But I can't just walk away from you, Elena. I can't let him keep ruining lives. I can't keep pretending I'm okay with everything my father did to people like you, like me. You think you can fix it? She asked, the bitterness creeping into her voice. You think you can take down my father and it'll make everything right? He'll just, what, suddenly care? The damage has been done, Jay. You've already started something you can't finish. Jay stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. Maybe I can't fix it all. But I can stop him. I can make sure he doesn't hurt anyone else. She shook her head, a tear finally slipping down her cheek. And what about me? What about us? The room fell silent, the only sound the storm outside, beating against the windows. Jay took a step back, his face twisting with conflict. I never wanted to drag you into this. But it's too late now, Elena. I can't just walk away from you. But I can't let my father go unpunished either. She wanted to scream. To tell him to leave, to never come back. But her heart wouldn't let her. Instead, she whispered, then what are we supposed to do? Jay took her hands in his grip tight. I don't know. But we'll figure it out. Together. But deep down, Elena knew the truth. There was no together anymore. She was caught in the middle of a war she never asked for, a war that would tear everything she knew apart. And there was no way out. The silence between Elena and Jay stretched out, suffocating them both. She wanted to push him away, tell him she couldn't do this, that she couldn't stand to be caught in this whirlwind of lies, betrayal, and revenge. But his touch, his presence, kept pulling her in, like gravity. She couldn't stop herself from wanting to believe that they could find a way through this, together. But deep down, she knew they were on a dangerous path. A path where there was no turning back. I have to go back, Elena said quietly, her voice trembling. I have to go back to him. My father's already looking for you, Jay. And when he finds you, he'll destroy everything you've worked for. Jay didn't move. He only stared at her, his expression unreadable. I know. I've been ready for this. But you're not ready. You haven't seen him for who he really is. Elena took a step back, her heart hammering in her chest. I've seen enough. I've seen the damage. My father doesn't care about people like you, Jay. You think he'll listen to your story? He'll just bury you. A flicker of pain flashed across Jay's face, but it was quickly masked by determination. Then I'll make him listen. I'll make him pay, Elena. Not just for me, but for everyone he's crushed under his boot. Her hands were shaking now, and she didn't know whether it was the fear of losing him or the terror of what he was about to do. And what about me, Jay? What do I do? I'm caught in the middle. If you go after my father, I'll lose you, but if I stay with him, I'll lose you anyway. This is tearing me apart. Jay's voice softened, almost like he was trying to convince himself as much as her. I never wanted you to be part of this war. I never wanted to bring you into this mess, but I can't stop now. And you're stronger than you think. You'll find your way out of it, Elena. You'll be free. The way he said it made her want to believe him, but deep down, she knew he was fooling himself. The truth was, there was no escaping this, not for her, not for him. The next day, things escalated quickly. Elena received a call from her father's security. They had found Jay. They had tracked his phone. He was heading straight into the heart of the city, toward the one place he knew would hurt Richard Beaumont the most, the secret vault beneath the mansion, the vault that held every illicit deal, every dirty secret that could bring down her father's empire. Elena's heart dropped to her stomach. She had tried to warn him, tried to make him see the danger. But now, it was too late. She was running out of time. She had to stop Jay before he made the biggest mistake of his life. With her father's men on his tail, Jay wouldn't have long. She knew that if he got to the vault, he'd unleash a storm he wouldn't be able to control. And if the evidence inside it went public, her father's empire would crumble, dragging them both down with it. But was that what she wanted? Was it worth it to destroy everything just for revenge? She didn't know anymore. The person she had once called her father was no hero, no protector. He was a tyrant, a man who destroyed lives to build his own. The thought of losing Jay, the only person who had ever truly seen her for who she was, felt like a knife to the heart. She loved him. But could she stand by and watch as he tore apart everything she had known? Everything that had made her who she was? Elena made a decision. She didn't call her father. She didn't call anyone. Instead, she grabbed her coat and raced out of the mansion. She had to get to Jay before he did something they couldn't come back from. She found him just as the storm was beginning to pick up again. The streets were slick with rain, the air thick with the tension of an impending disaster. She could hear the sirens in the distance, getting closer. Jay was standing outside a nondescript building, waiting. He looked up when he saw her, his face a mixture of relief and fear. "You came," he said, his voice hoarse. "I'm not letting you do this," Elena said, her breath coming out in quick bursts. "You don't have to go through with it. There's another way." Jay shook his head, a dark laugh escaping his lips. "There is no other way, Elena. This is the only way to make him pay." Her heart clenched. "You don't have to hurt him to make him pay. You don't have to destroy everything." "I've already destroyed everything," Jay said quietly, almost to himself. "And I've lost you." Elena stepped forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "You haven't lost me." "Not yet." But just as she reached for him, the sound of tires screeching to a halt echoed through the rain-soaked streets. A black SUV pulled up, its headlights blinding them both. And from inside, a shadowy figure stepped out, followed by two more. "Jay," Elena whispered, her voice breaking. "It's too late." The storm was coming. And they were both caught in its path. The SUV's headlights sliced through the rain, blinding them both. Elena instinctively stepped back, her heart racing. Jay's eyes flickered to the approaching vehicles, his hand instinctively reaching for the bag slung over his shoulder. He was ready for a fight. But Elena wasn't. Her mind raced. This wasn't supposed to happen like this. She thought she could stop him, make him see reason, but now, with her father's men closing in, she was trapped in the middle of a storm she couldn't control. The door to the SUV swung open with a hiss, and a tall, broad-shouldered man in a dark suit stepped out. Elena's breath caught in her throat. It wasn't just one of her father's security men. This was someone higher up, someone she recognized. "Mr. Cole," the man said in a cold, calculated voice. "You've been quite the problem for Mr. Beaumont." Elena's stomach dropped. This wasn't just about the robbery anymore. This was about power. Control. A message from her father to Jay, and to her. But what struck her as the most shocking was that the man wasn't looking at Jay. His gaze was fixed on her. The recognition in his eyes sent a chill down her spine. "You," he said, stepping closer to Elena. "You don't belong here." Her mind raced. "What are you talking about?" The man's lips curled into a small, cruel smile. "It's time you learned the truth, Miss Beaumont. You see, the war you think is between your father and Jaden Cole? It's not. Not really. The war has always been between you and your father." Elena's heart skipped a beat. What was he talking about? "I'm afraid your father's been hiding something from you," the man continued, his voice smooth as velvet. "A secret that's been kept from everyone, including you. A secret about your real connection to Jaden Cole." Jay's face tightened, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. "What do you mean by that?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "Your father wasn't the one who destroyed Jaden's family," he said, tossing the envelope at Jay's feet. "It was your mother." Elena's breath hitched. Her mother? The woman who had been a picture of grace, a beacon of high society? Her mother was responsible for the downfall of Jay's family? Her knees weakened, and she gripped the side of the SUV for support. The world around her seemed to blur. How could this be true? She had grown up believing that her mother was the heart of their family, the one who kept everything together. But now, this man, someone she had never seen before, was telling her that the very woman who had given her life had been involved in something far darker than she could ever have imagined. Jay, too, seemed stunned, unable to speak for a moment. He stared at the envelope in disbelief, as if the words inside it might somehow change everything he had been fighting for. The anger in his eyes had been replaced with something more complex: betrayal, confusion, and perhaps a flicker of doubt. "You're lying," Elena whispered, but her voice didn't sound sure, even to her own ears. "You're just trying to manipulate us." The man shook his head, his smile never wavering. "I don't lie. Your mother was deeply involved in a business deal that ruined Jaden's family. When the company went under, his parents lost everything. His sister died in the aftermath, and your father, well, he washed his hands of it. But your mother? She was the one pulling the strings." Elena felt like the ground had shifted beneath her feet. She had heard rumors over the years, whispers of shady deals, but she had always dismissed them. How could she have known? How could she have suspected the very woman who had raised her, who had nurtured her, could have been part of something so heartless? "You're wrong," she said again, but it was less convincing this time. Jay took a step forward, his voice low and dangerous. "If what you're saying is true, then everything changes. I was just a kid when my family was destroyed, but I'm not a kid anymore." The man didn't respond to him. His eyes stayed fixed on Elena, his gaze cold. "Everything changes, Miss Beaumont. And I think it's time you understood just how deep this goes." Before Elena could process the enormity of what she was hearing, the sound of distant sirens cut through the tension. Jay's head snapped toward the sound, and Elena could see the flicker of realization in his eyes. He was out of time. The man in the suit looked back at his men, who had been silently waiting behind him. "Get them." Elena stepped back, her heart hammering in her chest. She couldn't think straight, couldn't make sense of any of it. Her whole life was being turned upside down. Her father. Her mother. Jay. Everything she had believed to be true was crumbling, and she had no idea who to trust anymore. She took one last look at Jay, but he wasn't looking at her. His eyes were fixed on the men advancing toward them. The situation had spiraled out of control. Suddenly, everything shifted. Jay's hand shot out, grabbing Elena's wrist with a grip that felt like iron. "Come on," he said urgently, pulling her toward the back of the building. "We don't have much time." Before she could react, he was dragging her through the alley, the sound of footsteps and muffled voices echoing behind them. She could feel the weight of their pursuers gaining on them. But even as they ran, one thought gnawed at Elena's mind: what was her mother's secret? And how far would she go to protect it? The answers were just out of reach, and the storm was closing in. They sprinted through the rain-soaked alley, the sound of footsteps thundering behind them, growing closer with every passing second. Elena's breath came in ragged gasps, her mind still reeling from the revelation. Her mother, the woman she had trusted, had been part of the destruction of Jay's family. How could she have never known? Jay's grip on her wrist was tight, almost desperate. He didn't look back, his eyes fixed forward as he pulled her deeper into the maze of streets. The world around them seemed to blur in a haze of rain and adrenaline. She had to focus, had to make sense of what had happened, of everything she was learning, but there was no time. "Elena," Jay's voice was urgent, cutting through the chaos. "We need to keep moving. Your father's men won't stop until they have us." She nodded, though her thoughts were scattered. They turned a corner, and for a brief moment, Elena thought they might have lost them. But the sound of engines roaring to life shattered that hope. The SUVs were still behind them. Jay pulled her into an abandoned building, its entrance dark and foreboding. They stumbled into the shadows, breathless, waiting. The sound of the cars passing outside was deafening, but then everything went quiet. Too quiet. Jay's fingers tightened around her hand as they crouched behind a stack of old crates. His face was pale, his jaw clenched. But there was something else in his eyes now. Something that had shifted between them. "Listen to me, Elena," Jay said, his voice low and intense. "We can't keep running. Your father's going to keep coming after me, after us. We need to confront him." Elena swallowed, her heart hammering in her chest. "How do we even begin to confront him, Jay? He's untouchable." Jay's eyes locked onto hers. "Not anymore. There's a reason he's been hiding his secrets for so long. And now that you know the truth, we have leverage." Her mind raced. Leverage? What did he mean? Jay reached into his bag and pulled out the envelope from earlier. The one the man had thrown at his feet. "This is everything we need to bring him down," Jay said, opening it slowly. Inside were papers, photographs, legal documents, records of deals, all pointing to one undeniable truth. Her father had been behind not just the destruction of Jay's family, but countless others. The web of corruption was deeper than she had ever imagined. Elena's stomach churned as she scanned the documents, the pieces clicking into place. But even as the truth unfolded before her, a sense of dread settled over her. They couldn't just expose this. The risk was too high. If they went public with this, it wouldn't just ruin her father. It would destroy her entire world. "We can't do this, Jay," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I can't lose everything." Jay's face softened, but his eyes remained determined. "You won't lose everything. You'll gain everything. This isn't just about revenge, Elena. It's about justice." For a moment, Elena was torn. She didn't know who she was anymore. The family she had known was a lie. The man she loved was a product of that lie. Everything had been a carefully constructed facade, and now it was all crumbling down. Suddenly, the distant sound of footsteps interrupted her thoughts. Jay's head jerked toward the sound, his body tensing. "Stay here," he said, his voice urgent. "I'll handle this." Before she could protest, he was gone, disappearing into the shadows of the building. Elena stayed frozen, her heart racing, every sound around her amplified in the stillness. She didn't know what Jay was going to do, but she knew it wouldn't end well unless they found a way to expose her father, once and for all. Minutes dragged on like hours. Then, the door to the building slammed open. Elena's heart leaped into her throat as a figure stepped inside, shrouded in darkness. Her first instinct was to run, but something stopped her. The figure was too familiar. "Elena?" a voice called out, low and hesitant. She blinked, trying to make sense of what she was hearing. She squinted into the dark, and her breath caught. Standing in the doorway was her mother. Her eyes were red, her face pale, but there was no mistaking her. Elena's heart pounded in her chest as the realization hit her with the force of a freight train. "Mom?" Elena's voice was a breathless whisper. Her mother stepped into the light, her gaze meeting Elena's. "I'm sorry, darling. I'm so sorry." Elena couldn't speak. The shock was too much. Her mother was here, but the betrayal in her eyes, the guilt, was unmistakable. She had been a part of all of this. She had known the truth all along. "I didn't want you to find out like this," her mother said, her voice shaking. "But everything you've been told, it's all a lie. Your father, he's the one who destroyed your life, Elena. And he's been using you all these years as a pawn in his game." Elena's world spun out of control. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but she couldn't. Everything she had known about her family was gone in an instant. "And Jay?" Elena whispered, barely able to make the words come out. "What does he want?" Her mother's face hardened, but there was a sadness in her eyes. "He wants revenge. But that's not what he should want. He needs to know the truth, everything, not just what your father has told him." Before Elena could ask another question, the sound of footsteps thundered outside again. Jay burst through the door, his face a mixture of determination and fear. "Elena, we don't have time," he said urgently. "Your father's men are right behind me. We have to move, now." But Elena stood frozen, caught between the man she loved and the mother who had lied to her for her entire life. In that moment, the truth of everything they were about to face hit her with a sickening clarity. The choice wasn't just between justice and love. It was between saving the people she loved and destroying the empire her father had built. And then, in the most unexpected twist of all, her mother reached into her coat and pulled out a small, glimmering key. "This is the key to everything," she said, her voice trembling. "The vault. Everything you need to end this, everything you need to expose him, is inside. It's time for the world to know who Richard Beaumont really is." Elena's eyes widened as she took the key from her mother's hand. The weight of the moment was crushing. She had one choice, one moment to make things right. But would she be able to live with the consequences? With the sound of footsteps growing closer, Elena took a deep breath, turning to Jay. Their fates were intertwined, and this was their last chance to change everything. The rain was relentless as Elena stood frozen, holding the key in her trembling hand. The truth was there, in the vault her mother had spoken of everything she needed to expose her father's corruption and finally put an end to the web of lies and destruction that had consumed her life. She could feel Jay's eyes on her, the urgency in his gaze pushing her forward, but her mind was clouded with doubt. This was it. The moment of reckoning. She could destroy her father, but would it destroy her, too? Without a word, Jay grabbed her hand, his grip firm but gentle. "Elena, we don't have much time. We have to do this. The world deserves to know the truth." Elena looked at her mother one last time, searching for some reassurance, some sign that this was the right thing to do. But her mother only nodded, her face a mix of regret and resolution. "I've spent years hiding the truth. It's time to let it come to light. For your sake, for everyone's sake." With a final, shaky breath, Elena made her decision. She would not let her father's actions define her any longer. She would face the truth, no matter how painful. She looked at Jay, her heart pounding with a strange sense of resolve. They were in this together, and there was no turning back now. They ran through the corridors of the old mansion, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the quiet halls. Elena's hand never left Jay's, the key in her pocket a constant reminder of the choice she had made. The vault was in the heart of the mansion, hidden behind layers of security. But Elena had the key, and she had something even more powerful now, the truth. They reached the door to the vault. Elena's fingers shook as she slid the key into the lock, the cold metal turning with a satisfying click. The door creaked open, revealing rows of files, documents, and photographs, everything her father had hidden away to protect his empire. Her heart raced as she scanned the room, the weight of the moment heavy in the air. Jay stepped forward, his expression hardening as he flipped through the files. "This is it," he said, his voice low. "This is what will bring him down." Elena watched as he pulled out a stack of documents, photographs of her father's shady business dealings, bribes, and more. The evidence was irrefutable. It was all there. Her father had been behind the destruction of Jay's family, and so many others. And now, Elena held the key to bringing it all to light. But as she looked at the files, a thought crossed her mind. What would happen after this? Could she really live with the consequences? Would she ever be able to look at her father the same way again? Jay seemed to read her mind. He turned to her, his face softer now, the hardness replaced with understanding. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together. You don't have to carry this burden alone." Elena nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of peace. She wasn't alone. She had Jay, and with him, she could face whatever came next. They took the files and left the vault, moving quickly through the mansion. The storm outside had intensified, and the rain poured in sheets, but it felt like a cleansing. The truth was out. Nothing could stop them now. As they made their way to the front door, the sound of sirens grew louder, echoing through the night. Elena's heart pounded as she realized that the authorities were already on their way. Her father's empire was crumbling, and it was only a matter of time before the world knew the truth. When they reached the driveway, they found her mother waiting in the shadows, her face a mixture of relief and sadness. "I'm sorry, Elena. I never wanted to hurt you. But I couldn't let your father's lies continue." Elena didn't say anything at first. The weight of everything she had just learned was too much to process. But then, she stepped forward, her voice steady but emotional. "You did what you thought was right. We all have our reasons. But now, we have to face the consequences." Her mother nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "You're stronger than I ever was." With that, Elena turned to Jay. He gave her a reassuring smile, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to believe that they could make it through this. Together, they could rebuild what had been broken. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but it would be theirs to walk, and it would be built on truth, not lies. As the first rays of dawn broke through the storm clouds, they stood together, facing an uncertain future. But one thing was certain, the truth had set them free. And in the end, that was all that mattered.